Welcome back to Scoundrels, Inc., another Star Wars podcast. I am Frank Janis, joined by none other than Brandon Hanna, and this week we are concluding our Ahsoka Essential Episodes. It's part 5 of a 5-part series. We've been covering, we've covered 8 episodes thus far. Parts 1, 2, 3, and 4. We're on part 5, and this week we are finally covering Season 2 of The Mandalorian, Episode 5, Chapter 13, The Jedi, and then we will talk about the Book of Boba Fett. Yes, Ahsoka was in the Book of Boba Fett, believe it or not, despite the title of the series, Episode 6, or Chapter 6, From the Desert Comes a Stranger. If you've enjoyed what we've done here so far on the channel, please consider subscribing to the channel, clicking that like button, and leaving us a comment. That comment is also very important. Brandon will tell you why in a little bit. But we'd also would like for you to subscribe to the channel. We're trying to hit a goal of 500 subscribers. We've been kind of treading water at like 430 for the past too long, I guess. Not everything's about numbers, but it'd be nice to hit 500. That'd be kind of cool. You could also follow us on the app formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Threads as well. Brandon's a big fan of Threads. I see him threading.
Big threader.
Yeah, he's a big threader. There's some sort of like, I'm a thread in the sheets and something else in the streets. I haven't come up with that joke yet, but I'm workshopping it. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Patent pending. Nobody take it.
I shouldn't have put that out there. Oh gosh. Also, if you also like to listen to podcasts in its traditional form on an podcast feed, we do have that as well on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and probably wherever else you listen to your podcast. But Apple, Spotify, they're like the big two. They have the monopoly. Sorry, we didn't make up the rules, but you can go ahead and subscribe to our podcast feed over there. Now I talked about leaving a comment on this video, and that's because we're having a giveaway. Brandon, why don't you tell the good folks about how they can enter that giveaway and what we're giving away?
Yes, we are giving away, I believe, a Black Series Ahsoka figure, either the Star Wars Rebels version or the Mandalorian version live action. Winner's choice, of course. If you don't pick anything, I'm sure they have a lovely Shock T Black Series figure out there somewhere that I would personally like to have. You could gift it to me also. You say, let Brandon have it, and you won't get anything for it, but except for a virtual high five. Yes. So how do you win in this giveaway? Well, you could do many things. You could comment. That's worth a chunk of change. I don't remember the point distribution system personally.
One entry.
And then if you reply to somebody else's comment, that is two entries.
2 entries.
And if you send an email to our email listed in the description down below, telling us why you love Star Wars,
how you found Star Wars, how you love Star Wars,
you found it, why you love it, why you hate it. I don't know. An email is an email. That's worth 5 big ones, 5 big points, I believe. So yeah, I don't know how long we're doing this until what the deadline is, Frank.
Yeah, I think the next week will be the last show we do where you can enter, because then we will announce the winner on the 24th, August 24th, when we do our Ahsoka coverage of the first 2 episodes that premiere on the 23rd, the Wednesday, and then Thursday's episode where we'll be covering, obviously the premiere of Ahsoka, and then we will announce who has won the giveaway. So yeah, also, yes, the email is in the description, but I did write it down this time, Brandon. It's scoundrels4.inc@gmail.com on the screen and in the description, all of that. So a few of you have already done that, and what we're going to do is read some of those emails on next week's show. More about that at the end of the show as we get through everything we're going to get through here, because right now in the world, SAG-AFTRA and the WGA are currently on strike, and we've been talking about the strike for the past few weeks now here on the show and showing our solidarity with those striking and what they're fighting for and what they stand for. So, just because we are out here covering technically a struck company, we felt that there are other, one way is to continue to talk about the strike as we're covering, said company. So, I've gone into some detail in previous episodes about why I do feel strongly about the strike, and because I am part of a union and I really relate to the things that SAG and the WGA are fighting for. And so the past few weeks, I've been giving out some places where to go find some information and videos and whatnot. And one of the videos that I found really, really informational this week comes from none other than Dan Merle, who's already done a great breakdown of why the strike was happening and all of that. But he did a update video talking about what movies were delayed and what how far apart is the AMPTP and SAG-AFTRA? How far apart are they in negotiations? How close are they? It's a really great video. It's kind of a lengthy video, but it's very informative. And if you're really interested in understanding what's being fought for here by the unions, I really, really suggest you watch this video. Again, linked in the description. Another video I found just kind of it was a nice video to give the status of where SAG-AFTRA particularly is at with their negotiations, where they are at with their resolve in terms of this strike. And Fran Drescher did a CNN interview that I thought was really great. She talked about the 86% of actors in the union that can't meet the threshold to qualify for medical. So go watch that interview from Fran Drescher. It's really, really great. She does a great job of addressing some of the questions presented by the news anchors there and whatnot. And I think she's done a really great job of representing the union and being forthright as much as possible. So those are two things that I think, if you're not keeping up with the strike and would like to know more, I think these are two videos that are fairly up to date. Dan's came out about a week ago. It actually, I think, dropped about a week ago today. But I think it still holds relevancy. And then the Fran Drescher CNN interview came out, I think, earlier this week, a couple days ago. So still pretty relevant. I don't think there's really any new information that's going to develop between the time we record this and the time this airs, unfortunately. Like, let's say the strike ended. I wish that would be true, but it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. Brandon, before we move on to what we're here to talk about, any other words about the strikes or any final thoughts?
I think you covered it brilliantly, Frank. Of course, we support the unions, and we just hope that it's going to take as long as it takes. And at the end of it, they're going strong. It's great to see how many weeks it's been since the WGA first went on strike, and the picket lines are still flooded with people. So it's been great to see. So hopefully they'll reach an agreement soon. To quote Ron Perlman, there's more than one way to lose a house, Bob.
That's what I've been hearing. That's the word on the street.
It's the greatest quote.
I mean, it's incredible. I mean, when that video came out, good Lord. But yeah, talking about the picket lines, I think they shut down a street or two or something last week or something like that. So yeah, I mean, they're still going strong, which is great to see, because sometimes it's like a flash in the pan, and it's just it gets a media blitz for 2 or 3 days, and then it's it fizzles out. But the writers have been out there for 4 months now, and the actors have been out there for about a month or so now. So it's great to see that they're still going strong, and that's honestly really impactful, and it gives me hope that they're gonna get what they feel like they deserve, and
I will say, just before we move on, that I just remembered First Cut did a great interview with Danny Fernandez, and they've been posting a lot of great snippets from that interview on TikTok.
Oh, great.
And they've been really informative, even for me, someone who I feel like I'm pretty aware of what's going on, but I learn new things. So
yeah, totally.
Definitely go check that out.
Awesome. Okay, Here we go with part 5 of our Ahsoka Essential Episodes. And right now we're going to talk about Mandalorian Season 2, Chapter 13, The Jedi. And Brandon, I had not watched this episode in a while. And I was very excited to revisit this episode just purely on what I could remember, the imagery, and kind of what happens in this episode. It had been a while since I watched it. Was that the same for you?
Yeah, really like cool episode. Interesting title. Like I understand like in the context of the show how like Din is looking for a Jedi to like give Grogu to. It's the episode where we find out Grogu's name.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. But yes, because obviously Ahsoka is famously a citizen and not a Jedi.
Right. Thanks, Mace.
Yeah. But no, super cool. We see the owl thingy. I never remember what it's
Morai.
called.
Yeah. It took me a while to
Morai.
remember too. Yeah, but it's Morai.
Morai's
Morai.
in this one, guys. Keep an eye out.
Yeah.
It's easy to
I
miss.
missed it again this episode. Now that you bring it up, I'm like, damn it, I missed it.
Mhm.
Or did I? I don't know. See, yeah, I might.
And we get the cool white lightsabers in live action, I believe, for the first time.
Yeah,
So,
they did some pretty nifty things.
mhm.
They shot it pretty well with the white lightsabers, and I think what's really interesting about the white lightsabers, if we can just like harp on that for a moment, is because when we open up the episode, it's a very drab, very dark setting, and so they stand out, immensely, right? And
Mhm.
even I think further into the episode when she's inside the square, the village, what have you, there's that shot where she like opens them both up together, like
Yeah.
like that. I'm like,
Signature
man,
move.
yeah, so good. Oh, so good. But yeah, so to open, yeah, it is interesting that the Mandalorian has the title of an episode is The Jedi, and you're right. In the context of Din's journey, he is trying to look for a Jedi, the Jedi, and for Grogu. And little does he know, he doesn't really run into a Jedi. Although Ahsoka never says in this episode at all, "I am not a Jedi. I am no Jedi." She never says that at all, which is interesting because I'm trying to think back to, well, or recollect back to the last time we saw Ahsoka in her story, in her progression of story, which was at the end of Rebels, the series, right? And she's kind of Ahsoka the White, and she meets Sabine by the mural. We all know that, but there's no words. It's just voiceover by Sabine about kind of like this epilogue of sorts, right? The Empire's been defeated, blah blah blah. Does that whole speech to end the series, and we see Ahsoka and Sabine leave, but we don't know what Ahsoka has been through. By the time we last saw her, before that was World Between Worlds, and she goes off and ends up on Malachor again. We don't know how she got off Malachor. We don't know what adventures, who she's talked to, how she got involved in terms of trying to find Thrawn. What set her off to find Thrawn? We don't know any of that information. All we know is that we last saw her on Malachor, and now she's here on Lothal, picking up Sabine. And now we're here on this other planet. Oh, I forget what the name of it. Corvus? I don't know if that's right.
I don't know.
Anyway, she's on this planet now, and she's just wrecking shop to these other, I guess, hired guns for Morgan Elsbeth. And
Michael Biehn.
Michael Biehn is, yeah, man, great to see him in this episode too. So good. And it was such a cool live action introduction to Ahsoka that I thought was brilliantly executed, and it just gave me chills. If Kevin was here, I'm sure he'd be popping goosebumps all over the place right
Goosebumps.
now. Look, I got goosebumps.
Look.
Brandon, let's talk about Rosario Dawson though as Ahsoka. Because I think this was actually a question we got on our Discord from Thomas HH actually, and so I want to address this question now as we talk about the episode. And he says and asks, before we could see Rosario Dawson actually play Ahsoka, I was a bit worried because that character lived massively by Ashley Eckstein's voice work. Did you have similar worries, or were you confident that Rosario would win you over slash us over like she ultimately did. By the way, I still prefer Ashley's Ahsoka from Rebels. So yeah, what were your thoughts on Rosario portraying Ahsoka? Brandon, do you remember your first thoughts?
Yeah, well, I mean, to me, like, I still kind of feels like there's like this disconnect where like I watch Ahsoka in like Rebels or Clone Wars, and it feels like a different person because like I feel like the way like Ashley Eckstein portrays the character and the way that Rosario Dawson portrays the character are like very different. And then like you could like kind of chalk that up to like, oh, it's two different points in her life. It makes sense. But then like there's like kind of like weird crossover point where like we don't know when that scene with Sabine
Right.
takes place at the end of Rebels. Like I think it's like kind of gonna get like interwoven like this, like where we meet Ahsoka in the Jedi. I think people have been talking about for a long time, like takes place before that epilogue scene.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe. Um, but yeah, like aside from that though, like when I'm watching her play the character, it's like I definitely do like get the vibe of like this is like an older, like more stoic, like wiser, like Ahsoka. Like she's been around the block. Like she's like you could see like you know to talk about like well when we get into the next episode, I feel like there we could like really see like her like embracing the Jedi way again, for reasons that I'm excited to get into. But um, yeah, I think it's a difficult thing like you know to when someone does a voice acting performance super well and then you change the actor in live action. I think just naturally that's like a tall order, like but I think Rosario Dawson did as good of a job as anyone could do.
Yeah, I was trying to think back to my initial feelings on Rosario Dawson. Well, first of all, she was fan casted as
Yeah.
Ahsoka. So like there's kind of this it's very different than when uh Natasha Liu is casted as Sabine or Mary Elizabeth Winstead is casted as Hera, because they weren't fan casted for those roles. Rosario
Mhm.
Dawson was actually fan casted, on the internet to play if there was ever going to be a live action Ahsoka. Like this was just a pie in the sky thing of like, hey, what would be cool if this ever were a day to happen where you had live action Ahsoka, you should probably have Rosario Dawson do it. And everyone jumped on it and loved it and was doing art. And she herself even jumped on it. I think she even reposted something,
Mhm.
artwork of herself as Ahsoka, and she really embraced it. And I still feel like it's been evident in interviews and other appearances that she's really embraced the role. And I think I think actually Rosario Dawson and Ashley Eckstein have met. And I think I don't know what their conversations were or anything like that, but I think Ashley Eckstein was actually on the set. I don't know if she was I think she was on a set for the Ahsoka series. I don't know if she was on for a Mando series or a Boba Fett episode, but regardless, yeah, I think there is there is a tall order to fill from Ashley Eckstein's performance because it is pretty iconic, at least in Star Wars. Her performance and just such a large part of Ahsoka's story told in the animated world that we only have like 2 episodes of Ahsoka in live
Mhm.
action, and the second episode we'll talk about, she's only in it for like 15 minutes, so there's not a whole lot of live action. But I think
It
to take
feels more.
what's that?
It feels more than it is. Like I feel like I've seen her in live action more
I
than
think
I have.
that's yeah. I don't know if that's because of the marketing's ramped up lately. It just feels like there's more. And then we've just been talking about this Ahsoka series coming for so long. But I think you're right. It does kind of feel like she has been in more. But I think it's also this the same can be said for how much she appears in Rebels. I've been doing some rewatching of the series, and I've seen other people talk about this in their own rewatches about, man, I thought Ahsoka was in Rebels a lot more, but she's really not. And I think that's true for when we covered those a couple Rebels episodes. Aside from Twilight of the Apprentice parts 1 and 2, which she's all in, right? But World Between Worlds, she's not in it for that much either. There's a chunk of it, but it's a really contained part of that chunk of the episode. So it's not as expansive, if you will. But getting back to Rosario Dawson playing Ahsoka, I really liked the idea of it as a fan cast. I was like, yeah, that'd be cool. That could totally work. But then she actually gets casted as Ahsoka, and I was like, wow, I can't believe that, like, a fan cast that actually pans out. And I wouldn't say I was nervous about her playing Ahsoka. I was very curious how I was going to feel, how she was going to feel as Ahsoka. And I got to say, initially, I think she really nails it. And part of it is because there's such a big time jump between when we last see her in World Between Worlds and when we see her in this episode of The Mandalorian. And notwithstanding that epilogue scene, which we don't even hear her talk, we don't know her mindset, we don't know what she's all about at that point. So you can't really base it. At least I don't. I don't base it off of that, and I don't think Rosario would have based any of her character Ahsoka on that one scene or whatever. It's probably based on everything, all their talking parts, right? But there is this jump, like you talk about, Brandon. Like, she's a much wiser, stoic. Portrayal of Ahsoka, and I still even think, like, Rosario Dawson's voice matches pretty well for a quote unquote more mature Ahsoka as well, and she's not trying to imitate Ashley Eckstein's Ahsoka voice or anything like that. It's really just Rosario Dawson playing Ahsoka as, I don't know, what is Ahsoka, like 60 at this point or something like that?
I don't know. And then, like, the time difference when she was, like, in the world between worlds, like
shaved off like a couple of years, I think.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, I think Rosario Dawson, I'm thrilled with her performance thus far between the two episodes she's been in live action, and she's one of the reasons why I'm so excited for the series. Just, I want to see her more as Ahsoka. There's a part in this episode of The Jedi where I feel like I'll also say this about Rosario. She does a great job of portraying Ahsoka, who the fierce warrior. I don't know if you recall that. I mean, her in the forest initially, and then when she attacks Din, Brandon, like, that. I mean, I was just like, man, she really came out swinging against Din.
Yeah, no, the physicality, I think, is like handled really well, and even like in the like trailers and stuff that we've seen for the show, that's gonna carry on. So, like, I'm excited to see that continue going forward.
Now you talked about, she reveals to Din that Grogu is the child's name.
How do we know she didn't just make it up?
Right. Well, we know. Well, we know. Well, because, like, what did she like? Hey, Bill, I'm going to tell your name is actually Grogu because I don't really like the name Bill. So let's just call you Grogu from now on. I'm going to tell him.
That sounds made up. It sounds like you made it up.
Yeah, but there is a scene that I caught this time, and I think I caught it the first time or the second time I watched the episode a long time ago, where she's trying to kind of test Grogu and take the stone from the hand, and Grogu's not really vibing with Ahsoka at that point, so she asks Din to do it, and at this point Din knows Grogu's name is Grogu, and he's like, all right, kid, come and get the stone. And then Ahsoka walks up next to Mando, and then in his ear goes, Grogu, and then walks away. And to me, that was, not only is it just being written by the guy Dave Filoni, like the guy for Ahsoka, Dave Filoni, but the way Rosario Dawson also delivers that line, that is, I think Ashley Eckstein or Rosario Dawson could have said, you could have asked me who said that line, and I think they would have delivered it almost in the same way, because I felt like, I don't know, for me, that just really was an Ahsoka like moment or a line or an inflection in the voice, and it just rings really true to the character to me for whatever reason. I just feel like that right there, like, Rosario Dawson encapsulated Ahsoka right there in that little moment with just that little, like, hey guy, it's Grogu, because there is like a bit of a fun side to Ahsoka, right? And she can be a little, obviously, when she's around Sky Guy, things get
Yeah, I was gonna
quippy.
say. I'm like, that's a lot come from the person who came up with Sky Guy.
Right, exactly. So I don't know. If someone out there is blanking on that moment, I suggest you go back and watch that moment real quick.
All right, kid. Lift the stone.
Grogu.
Yeah, so that's kind of right there, and then I was like, man, I'm completely sold now. That for me did it right. That little part, that's all it took for me, at least. I know it might take more for other people out there, and that's totally fair, because Ahsoka is at this point quite an iconic character in Star Wars lore. And then, okay, so let's progress to the action part of the episode where Din and Ahsoka are teaming up now and taking on the town, or Morgan Elsbeth and her henchmen, if you will, and Michael Biehn, right? And they have the HK assassin droids. And what I loved about this, too, was how Ahsoka, they still were able to do, like, classic Ahsoka moves, jumping on the roofs and kind of like her just flying through the air. And I thought that was really, really well done, Brandon. What about you?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, as someone who like hasn't seen all of Ahsoka in the animated shows, I can't, I guess say with 100% certainty like how well it is portrayed, but I've definitely enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's why I think your perspective is an interesting one, because you almost have like almost equal amount of time between live action and animated Ahsoka. So I'm really curious, on your thoughts, as we continue, about where you lie with live action and animated Ahsoka. So like the big part here also in Ahsoka's part of this story is her duel with Morgan Elsbeth. And she has this duel, and it's such a classic like samurai setup, it's these two meeting in like there's like a koi pond and everything. It has the whole setup, the whole shebang. It's great. And right there you talk about the physicality. I mean, right there you see Rosario wielding these lightsabers as Ahsoka. Ahsoka's dueling Morgan Elsbeth, and she's Morgan Elsbeth is battling with a pure Beskar spear, which is like sacrilegious to the Mandalorian because it's never for weapons, it's for armor, right? But regardless, they're having this duel. I don't know, Brandon, did this duel do anything for you in terms of the kind of the prowess both of these characters have?
Well, I think it was like the first time that I could remember seeing like Beskar deflect a lightsaber.
Oh, right.
So that was like really cool to see that was possible. And just like overall, like what the fight was like leading up to, like where is Grand Admiral Thrawn? And it's like, oh, she said it. She said the name.
Right.
It was pretty cool because, I mean, that's like spun into like so many fan theories, especially of mine since that moment. I'm like, is he going to be the culminating villain in the Filoni verse? What's going to happen? But yeah, I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think that right there, that whole line, I mean, where's Grand Admiral Thrawn? It's just like, okay, where are we going now? Obviously we're not done with Ahsoka. You just don't throw that out there, because this easily could have been just like Ahsoka pops up, she plays her part in Grogu's journey, and then off she goes back off into the mist or whatnot. But no, they throw in the Grand Admiral Thrawn line, and we're like, oh, holy shit! Like, okay, obviously this was like a backdoor pilot of sorts for the Ahsoka series. And I love this duel. I love the fact that actually Morgan Elsbeth disarms one of Ahsoka's lightsabers, and then you get the classic backward saber stance from Ahsoka.
Mhm.
She turns around, and you even see Morgan Elsbeth's face go, "Oh, okay, this is she's switching up like her stance." She gets like a weird look on her face, like I don't know how about this, and you just get this very ferocious look on Ahsoka's face, and it's so again, I just think it's so true to the animated version that we've gotten of Ahsoka, and it's still here in this live action version, which I think is great, and which is why I totally think the Ahsoka series is going to be tremendously successful, in large part due to Rosario and her portrayal of Ahsoka. But this was such a fun episode to have Ahsoka back in there because you really got it all from Ahsoka. I mean, you have some, you have the kindness, you have the ferociousness, you have that warrior mentality, you have her interaction with Grogu using the Force, and she even talks about Yoda, or like very briefly. She's like, I've only seen one other, creature of his kind like before. So like all these little snippets, and it raised so many questions about what has Ahsoka been going through all this time to get to this point, which I would like to think in some way they're going to address in the series coming up here in a couple weeks. Any last thoughts on this episode before we move on?
No, I think we just about covered it. I will say when you were like, I've only seen like one other creature of this kind of like Yoda, like Empire Strikes Back. Yoda just came out of the woodwork like, Yoda? You mean Yoda? I'm like, Master, you're supposed to be dead.
What if he just popped up as like a Force ghost and was just like, yeah, there goes my boy.
He could at any time.
He could.
Yeah. Be like, my son, that is. Proud I
am. All right, let's move on to the Book of Boba Fett, Chapter 6.
Yes.
From the desert comes a stranger.
I was going to say, where of course we would expect to see Ahsoka interact with Luke Skywalker as in Boba Fett.
You know what? It is wild that of the 6 episodes that Book of Boba Fett had, one of them, well, 2 of them have nothing to do, well, not do with Boba Fett, but like he's definitely sidetracked. Regardless, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Ahsoka Tano and the role that she's playing, essentially towards Luke Skywalker as kind of like a mentor of sorts. It seems like. And a guide for Grogu, a mentor or a guide for Grogu, because I think you talk about you brought this up top, Brandon, about how she's kind of a little more following the ways of the Jedi. Talk about what you meant by that.
Yeah, I just like seeing her next to Luke as he's building his Jedi temple, like taking on his like first student that we know of. It's like okay, she's like, like I left the Jedi, during the Clone Wars, and there was a lot wrong with what they did, and but now like I have a feeling that the Jedi Order is in capable hands, and like like I'm willing to like be a part of that and like lend my guidance. Is like that's like the feeling that I get from her, where she's like there's a sense of trust in Luke. Obviously the connection like with Anakin and all that like aside, is just like she I think it seems like she sees like the Jedi are capable of being what they were always meant to be, and this is like a fresh start. Little does she know what's going to happen later. Solo. But yeah, that was like the impression that I got, and seeing the two of them like interact, like that's something like, did you ever think you were going to see? Like,
man,
watching the Clone Wars and seeing her be Anakin's apprentice, and then knowing years later she's going to like hang out with Luke post Return of the Jedi
with R2 as well. I mean,
yeah,
I think that's kind of like the other reunion that gets a little overshadowed is her with R2. Like, yeah, I mean, obviously her and Luke, that's mind blowing, right? Because like as you said, Anakin, then to Luke, and it's her. But also, like, we also know Ahsoka has a soft spot for droids, and so for her to be reunited or see us have that on-screen reunion with R2 all these years later in her story. I geeked out about that just because it's R2D2. I mean, it's really R2D2 and Ahsoka know like the most about everything that's gone on with the Skywalkers. Really, I mean, they've been there for all of it. And so they're like the two OGs of like the Skywalker story. I mean, they are like the vessels in which their stories can be told. And I think about that this might be weird, but I think about it quite often that R2D2 has all of this knowledge, like all this history, like his memory has never been wiped, whereas C-3PO is getting freaking neuralized like every other week, it seems like. But R2D2, he's got loads of information within him. And same thing with Ahsoka, but
and he's got all of C-3PO's memories.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
Oh my! Oh, what?
How many terabytes?
I was gonna say
hard drive, man.
What's the next? What's the next level above terabyte? What's the
terabytes? I should know this.
Oh yeah, what is it, science guy?
I think about so terabytes is like 10 to the 12, right?
I don't know.
Because wait, megabytes. Yeah.
Gigabytes.
10 to the 6. Gigabytes 10 to the 9. And then comes terabytes, right? 10 to the 12. So maybe like 10 to the 15?
Okay, what is that? What is tera, tetra?
Google
Yeah, Google it.
I'm going to Google it. They're like metric prefixes. Come on, I mean, as an engineer, when am I ever going to go above tera anything?
Well, you never know. So seeing Ahsoka, with both Luke and R2 was really great.
Oh, the petabyte.
Petabyte. Oh wow, not sponsored.
But then after that, 10 to the 18 would be the exabyte.
Oh wow, I bet you R2's got exabytes. He's got an
exabyte hard drive.
He has to. We're talking like. Also, remember pre-episode 1 that he's easily 100 years old, right? Mm-hmm. Easily. That's at least that's what I'm thinking. Old. I think he's like 100. Anyways, so Ahsoka, I think we do see her, when she's interacting with Din in terms of Din wants to go see Grogu, and you're right about this going back to the Jedi ways of she's very conscious of the attachment and the fear that comes with it, and not having Grogu go down that path, because she initially does not want to train Grogu because of the fear that's within him, and she references Anakin, without saying Anakin, about I've seen this in the best of the Jedi Knights, and what it can do, which is a very that's a poignant line, if you know of her history, and if you don't know her history, and what she's talking about, it still sets up the fact that even you hear the phrase Jedi Knight, the title Jedi Knight, it can do damage to a Jedi Knight in that way. It still sets like a threshold of like, this is a bad thing. But if you know her history, if you know who she's talking about, it's so much more impactful, and how she's recognizing that in Grogu, and then the attachment as well, because Anakin has attachment. Grogu and Din, they have this attachment toward each other, and she tells Luke, she's like, their bond is very strong. I told you about this, because Luke says, I wonder even if his heart is in it, or something to that effect, right? Mm-hmm. And then Ahsoka goes to Luke, so much like your father, and I was like, bro, okay, stop trying to hit us in the feels, man. Like this is like cool already that they're having a conversation, but for her to even then reference Anakin, and it's like, I knew your dad. He says he would say the same stuff right now, and I thought that was really great, that they did that in that moment.
Yeah. What if she was like, so much like your father? What do you mean? No legs, and she cuts his legs off right there.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, there's got to be some alternate take on that scene.
I know there were like other like memes about that, like something to do with younglings. I don't
Oh
remember.
yeah.
Oh no, it cuts to like him igniting his lightsaber like in front of Grogu because there's like that one shot.
Oh yeah, that's right.
It's like so much like your father.
Oh no. Oh, that's right. And like Luke unlocks Grogu's like PTSD. Just like he's like, do you want to remember? You want to remember when you almost died? Just like
those big wide like cat eyes. He's like,
yeah. And it's fun though to watch that scene and go, Kelleran Beck, baby, come on out, come on down. Yeah,
dude, that was sick.
Yeah. But yeah, so Ahsoka's interaction with Luke, and she really, like, I think you're right about kind of really touching on the becoming, a true Jedi and everything that they stood for, unlike how they were kind of more dogmatic in their views back at the height of the Republic or the fall of the Republic. And, I do think you're right in terms of, like, now that it's been burnt to the ground, like, and Luke, we have a fresh start with this. Luke, son of Anakin, his intentions he has well-meaning intentions, and I feel like, this could be, if anyone's going to do it, then he can do it and do it the right way. Because she talks about, like, hopefully that she's like, Grogu will be his first student, hopefully this will be a school, and so I think as much as, you may think that Ahsoka is against the way of the Jedi Order, not necessarily the way of the Jedi. I think you can make a distinction between the way of the Jedi and the way of the Jedi Order. I don't know. Maybe if I'm splitting hairs too much there, but I think Ahsoka is very much, in favor of the way of the Jedi, what they really stand for. And if Luke can perhaps bring a new school of Jedi without having being so constrained the way it was before during her time with the Order, then maybe things can be all right. And so it was interesting to hear her talk about the things she was talking about with Luke and attachment and fear and all of those types of things. And because because people like to classify Ahsoka as like a quote unquote gray Jedi, which it isn't really a thing, but it's just like I kind of sympathize with some of the people who would be like, if she's not in the Jedi Order, then technically you're not a Jedi, you're just a Force wielder. But to me, at least to me, like, she is like through and through what a Jedi should be. So I will reference her as a Jedi. Because I think she's
a very upstanding citizen.
Yes, she's a very upstanding Jedi citizen. Yeah, so I think these two episodes gave us a great preview of what to expect, or what to hopefully to expect in the Ahsoka series in terms of Rosario Dawson's portrayal of the character, and it was a lot of fun revisiting these episodes in terms of what it means for Ahsoka and like in her journey. Real quick though, gotta say, man, watching the Boba Fett episode, From a Desert Comes a Stranger, Cobb Vanth, man, we need that guy back. We need Timothy Olyphant back. Him as Cobb Vanth is so good. I love Cobb Vanth because of Timothy Olyphant's portrayal. But that's neither here nor there. We're not talking about the essential the essential Cobb Vanth episodes. We'll do that series one day, which is like 3 episodes, I guess. All right, so before we get out of here, we have I think one more question here, and it actually kind of ties to this episode, but not in an Ahsoka way. It's kind of a funny question, but I'm curious about your answer here, Brandon, off the top of your head here. Erden 2.5 asks, assuming Cad Bane is really dead, what did Boba Fett do to his corpse? What do you think he did?
Left it there.
He just left it there? Boba just
left it there to rot.
To rot.
Anything else would be too much respect.
The Discord did get a little jokey in terms of showing Rancor GIFs which was kind of like my initial thing. Like,
He fed it to the Rancor.
just fed it to his little baby Rancor, like, here you go, buddy. Do we know the Rancor's name? Is it Bruce? I just want to name him Bruce.
I don't know. That whole Rancor thing was like a weird red herring. Like Danny Trejo acted in sus as hell, and you're like, oh, he's gonna turn that Rancor on Boba, and then the Rancor was just like, nah, Boba's my daddy. Danny Trejo was telling the truth the whole time,
Right?
And I'm
right.
like, damn, what was that all about then? I don't know. This is coming from someone who really liked the Book of Boba
That's
Fett.
right. I know
found
you
that
do.
Very confusing. And I was like, was Danny Trejo just not? Was he just like phoning it in? Like, I don't understand. I don't know.
We'll have to go back and do we'll have to do a series review on the channel of.
He
Book
was
of
like
Boba
acting
Fett.
like he was up to something.
Yeah,
Maybe he
yeah.
wasn't.
We'll have to do a whole. We haven't because we started after Book of Boba Fett, so this channel. So we'll one of these days we'll go back and do a whole series review of Book of Boba Fett. That'll be fun actually, because there's some interesting stuff to talk about that series. But anyways, all right. Before we get out of here and wrap up this week's episode. Next week, we will be doing a Ahsoka series preview about everything we know so far that has come out. Not leaks, not these stupid stories that are trying to get clicks, but like legitimate stuff that we know about. Well, also, myself and Kevin Smets were down at San Diego Comic-Con, and we stopped by the Star Wars booth, and they had a bunch of Ahsoka props on display. I took a bunch of pictures of them. Really cool. I mean, they had Baylan Skoll's lightsaber up there, Sabine's lightsaber up there. They had Ahsoka's lightsaber. They even had her ship. A bunch of other props. I took a bunch of pictures of that. They even had the mural up there from the Rebels. It was awesome. Going to go through all that next week in terms of like an Ahsoka series preview and kind of dig into some of those props. And because there's some blurbs underneath that I want to share on the show in terms of what it could mean for certain characters and whatnot. It gives a little more insight. And if you had wanted to go to the San Diego Comic-Con, couldn't make it, wanted to make it to the Star Wars booth, hopefully we can give you a little virtual tour of the booth that was at Comic-Con. Also, we will be going over or talking about reading through the emails that we've gotten over the past few weeks about how you discover Star Wars, why you love Star Wars. So we'll get into some of that. That's next week, and last week. That's the last episode. You can enter in our giveaway. Even the emails, you can still do the emails up through till I want to say August 21st would be the deadline for the emails to come in. But until then, this has been Scoundrels Inc., and we'll just see you in the next one.
Scoundrel. Scoundrel. I like the sound of that.